Something's off in the dark. 7:30 p.m. April 4th, 2026. An 8-foot dinghy pushes away from Hopetown, Bahamas, carrying a husband and wife back to the sailboat they call home. 4 minutes later, by every account, one of them is gone. This is the case of Lynette Hooker, 55 years old, a strong swimmer, an experienced sailor, a woman who, according to her own daughter, never once touched the engine key on that boat. And yet, hours after she vanished into open water, her husband told police the key was the reason he couldn't save her. You're about to hear the evidence federal investigators have spent 2 months collecting: GPS data, hidden cameras, a boat seized off the coast of Florida, and a recording where the man at the center of this case contradicts his own story, in his own voice. None of it has been placed together like this before. Picture the water that night. 3-foot swells, no moon, the kind of dark where you can't see the person sitting next to you, only hear them. Brian Hooker says, the wind tore the dinghy apart in seconds. He says Lynette went into the water. He says he lost an oar, threw an anchor, and paddled alone for 7 hours, until he reached shore at 4 in the morning. That's the account he gave Bahamian police. It is not the only account he gave. Ask yourself something before we go further. If your story was true, would it stay the same every time you told it? Because his didn't. Brian Hooker has not been charged with a crime. He denies any wrongdoing. But federal investigators have been treating this as a possible homicide since the first week of April, while the public was still being told it was a missing persons case. If you want to see where the evidence actually leads, subscribe now, because this investigation is still active, and it is still moving. What his own phone recorded that night does not match a single word of what he told police. Before the water, before the dinghy, before any of it, there was a woman with a plan. Lynette Hooker grew up in Michigan, married Brian for 25 years. Somewhere in that marriage, they decided to trade a house for a sailboat and call it the Soulmate. In April 2023, they launched an Instagram page under the name The Sailing Hookers, documenting a retirement spent chasing open water. By February of this year, they were living aboard full-time in the Bahamas. Her daughter, Carly Aylesworth, described her as fit, strong, the kind of swimmer who didn't panic in open water, someone who showed up early to help you set up and stayed late to help you clean up. That detail matters more than it sounds like it should. Because here's the question investigators keep circling back to. If you put a strong swimmer a few feet from her own boat, in water she'd sailed for months, how does she disappear without a trace? Carly has said, on the record, that her mother never drove the dinghy, never touched the ignition, never held the key. Hold on to that fact. You'll need it in a few minutes, because it directly contradicts the reason her husband gave police for why he couldn't save her. Lynette Hooker was not a novice on the water the night she vanished. She was, by every account from the people who knew her best, one of the last people anyone expected to lose a fight with the sea. Which raises the only question that actually matters right now. What happened in those 4 minutes between the dock and the boat that took her from a woman who never fell to a woman who never came back? Here is the story Brian Hooker gave Bahamian police, word for word, as close as the record allows. They left Hopetown at 7:30 p.m. 4 minutes later, by the route Fox News Digital later recreated with a local boat captain, they should have reached the Soulmate. Instead, he says the wind hit fast. 3-foot swells. The dinghy split them apart before either of them could react. He says Lynette tried to swim back toward the sailboat. He says the current took her one way and him the other. He says one of the oar pins snapped and the oar went over the side. He says he threw the anchor. He says he yelled her name into the dark for as long as he could and heard nothing back. He says the engine died because Lynette was wearing the safety lanyard, the cord attached to the key that cuts power if the operator goes overboard. That single detail is the hinge his entire account depends on. Without that key on her wrist, the engine had no reason to fail. He says he paddled through the night with one oar, adrift for roughly 7 hours, until he washed ashore near Marsh Harbor just before 4 a.m. That is the account. Notice what it requires to be true. It requires Lynette to have been holding a key her own daughter says she never touched. It requires an engine failure with only one possible cause, and no room for another explanation. Brian Hooker has not been charged with a crime. This is his stated version of events, not a confirmed sequence of what happened. But investigators had a separate source of information that night, one that didn't come from his memory, or his statement, or his maps. It came from his phone, and it told a different story entirely. Here is the piece of evidence that changed the direction of this entire investigation. It didn't come from a diver. It didn't come from a cadaver dog. It came from a navigation app running quietly on Brian Hooker's own phone. When federal investigators extracted that data, they found a track. Not a device drifting helplessly with the current. A track that moved across the water, stopped in a specific area of the Sea of Abaco, and then returned to shore. Sit with that for a second. A device that stops and comes back isn't describing someone paddling in blind panic for 7 hours. It's describing a trip with a destination. CBS News was first to report the contradiction. Fox News Digital independently confirmed the data came directly from the marine navigation app Brian was actively running that night. Not the boat's built-in instruments, not a third-party tracker. His own software, recording in real time. Here's what that data actually cost. NBC News reported that a U.S. official said Brian's account sent search teams into the wrong stretch of the Sea of Abaco. For weeks. Every early search followed the geography he described. The GPS data pointed somewhere else entirely, a zone reaching 25 feet deep that no one had searched, because nothing in his story suggested they should. A source briefed on the case told Fox News Digital that Bahamian authorities approved a new search only after U.S. investigators presented this GPS evidence. In June, the Coast Guard cutter Margaret Norvell arrived at Marsh Harbor. Divers entered the water on June 2nd. Underwater drones swept what divers couldn't reach. Surveillance aircraft flew overhead. The search concluded without finding Lynette Hooker. That doesn't close the contradiction. It deepens it. 2 months of open water, current, and marine activity can move remains far from where a phone once stopped moving. One question now sits above every other. If his phone went somewhere his story never mentioned, what was he doing there? And why did investigators need his own device to find out? Every vessel, like the Soulmate, carries a transponder. It broadcasts identity, speed, and position, automatically, to anyone watching. Other boats, coast guards, marine tracking services. It's designed to never go silent. On April 4th, at 9:29 p.m., the Soulmate's transponder did exactly that. It went dark. It stayed dark for more than 11 hours and didn't broadcast again until 8:40 the next morning, after Brian Hooker had already reported his wife missing. Marine tracking company Vessel Finder handed that data to Fox News Digital. Kenneth Angelrand, a maritime law expert at the University of Houston, reviewed it and made a distinction worth sitting with. A system failing completely and never coming back looks like a malfunction. A system that goes off and then comes back on, hours later, looks like something else. His words, "That's an action. Something was turned off, deliberately, and turned back on." That blackout wasn't isolated. Vessel Finder recorded 3 more gaps between April 10th and 13th, the exact window Brian Hooker was still in Bahamian custody. 4 blackouts in 10 days. The first on the night his wife disappeared. Now add the camera. The Soulmate carried a FLIR system, forward-looking infrared, capable of detecting a human body's heat signature in total darkness. A friend of the couple told investigators about it in early May, describing a unit worth roughly $33,000, with a self-tracking mode built to record automatically. That footage doesn't live only on the device. It syncs to a cloud account, one investigators can reach independently of anything done to the camera afterward. If that system was recording on April 4th, it may hold a thermal record of everything that happened on that boat after 7:30 p.m. The transponder went dark. The camera may not have. 3 separate pieces of physical evidence are sitting in federal hands right now. None of the results have been made public. Here's what each one is capable of revealing. Start with the dinghy. The same 8-foot boat Brian Hooker says Lynette fell from. The U.S. Coast Guard took custody of it and transported it to the United States for forensic examination. That process isn't a visual inspection. Investigators use luminol testing, which reacts with the iron in hemoglobin, capable of detecting biological traces even after they've been diluted, washed, or soaked in seawater for weeks. Surfaces get swabbed. Fibers get cataloged. None of that is fast, and none of it has been released yet. One detail matters here more than any other. Brian's account requires the ignition key to have been on Lynette's wrist that night. Carly Aylesworth has said her mother never operated that dinghy, never touched the key at all. If that's accurate, the safety lanyard would never have been anywhere near her. Whether investigators find evidence the lanyard was moved or removed is one of the open questions the forensic results may answer. Then there's June 3rd. Members of the Broward County Sheriff's Office arrived at the Hopetown Inn with a cadaver dog named Maggie. These dogs aren't trained to find someone lost or injured. They're trained to detect specific compounds the human body releases after death. Compounds that persist on surfaces long after standard cleaning, long after water exposure. The Coast Guard's own statement said Maggie was deployed to newly identified areas of interest. Not random ground, specific ground, chosen because of evidence developed over 2 months. And then, the piece almost no one has reported. A family friend told investigators about video recorded in Michigan, before the couple ever left for the Bahamas, before the dinghy, before the ocean. Federal investigators identified that footage and sought it out specifically. Ask yourself why a boating accident investigation would need footage recorded on land, months before anyone stepped near a boat. Whatever that video shows has not been disclosed, but investigators knew to ask for it. And that alone tells you where their theory of this case actually begins. There is the story Brian Hooker told publicly, and there is the story he told privately, on the phone, to people who weren't reporters or police. Publicly, in a statement before his arrest, he described unpredictable seas and high winds that swept his wife away. Privately, in a message to his friend Daniel Danforth, he said something looser. The wind blew me away from her, and she swam toward the sailboat. No mention of the anchor. No mention of the broken oar pin, at least not in that version. A friend named Blaine Stevenson started recording their phone calls 2 days after Lynette disappeared. His reason, in his own words, Brian's account was inconsistent, and he was getting confused. In one of those recordings, Brian described something ambiguous involving a flare pistol near the stern. In another, he describes bailing water from the dinghy 5 or 6 times. A maritime law expert who reviewed the recordings said it plainly. He's telling 5 different stories, and none of them line up. Then there's the voicemail. 3 days after Lynette vanished, Brian left Carly a message about a flotation device recovered near the search area. Carly has described his tone on that call as flat, monotone. Not the voice, she said, of someone who'd just spent hours alone believing his wife of 25 years had been swept away. Carly has also said on the record that her mother described a prior incident from 2024, an alleged threat during an argument aboard the boat. CNN could not independently confirm that account with law enforcement, and Brian's attorney has denied it. A separate 2015 Michigan police report documented that both Brian and Lynette accused each other of assault. That warrant was denied for insufficient evidence. None of this proves what happened on the water, but it establishes something simpler. The public version of this story and the private version were never the same one. This case is not being handled like a boating accident. It's being handled like a homicide investigation with international jurisdiction, because that's exactly what it is. The United States has a statute covering the murder of American citizens on foreign soil. It's the legal basis letting federal agencies operate in Bahamian waters, gather evidence internationally, and build toward prosecution independent of any Bahamian criminal proceeding. A U.S. official confirmed this framework was in place from the first week of April, while the public was still hearing about a missing person, not a homicide inquiry. The search warrant executed on the Soulmate in April described the seized items as material evidence related to a missing person causing bodily harm. That phrase was written into the warrant within days of Lynette's disappearance. Investigators weren't waiting for proof. They were classifying the case from the very beginning. Evidence from this investigation is being processed at the FBI laboratory in Quantico, Virginia, a facility that exists to build cases that survive courtroom cross-examination, not to file paperwork on an accident. A former FBI agent, now a Fox News contributor, said plainly that there is likely far more evidence than the public has seen. Withholding details at this stage isn't concealment. In an active federal case, it's strategy. And then Brian Hooker himself became harder to find. On April 14th, one day after his release from Bahamian custody, he told ABC News he was staying in the Bahamas, focused solely on finding his wife. Hours later, his attorney said he'd left the country to be with his terminally ill mother. For a while, he remained publicly visible. Interviews, statements, denials. Then that visibility stopped. A source who described themselves as a close friend told Fox News Digital that Brian may have crossed into Mexico, by land or water. A man over 6'4", with a distinctive Marine Corps tattoo and stark white hair, does not disappear from ordinary American life by accident. Brian Hooker has not been charged with a crime. He has denied any wrongdoing throughout. But ask yourself this: if you had nothing to hide, and investigators were building a federal case around you, would you make yourself harder to find? 2 months in, more questions exist than answers. The FLIR camera's cloud data is still being processed. If that system was active on April 4th, it may hold a thermal record of the Soulmate that night, independent of anything done to the physical device afterward. The dinghy remains in federal custody. No forensic results have been released. The Michigan footage, recorded before the couple ever left American soil, sits inside the investigative file. What it shows, and why federal investigators specifically sought it out, has not been disclosed. And Brian Hooker's exact location, as of now, is not publicly confirmed. None of these threads have closed. A former federal prosecutor noted that a case like this can, in theory, move forward even without recovered remains. But it requires ruling out every alternative explanation first, including the possibility that Lynette is still alive somewhere, by choice. Silence from investigators at this stage isn't the sound of a case going cold. It's usually the sound of one being built towards something specific. Ask yourself, which of these 4 answers changes this case the most? The camera, the dinghy, the footage, or his location? Because when even one of them surfaces, the story you've just heard may not hold together the same way. Here is what's confirmed, and what isn't. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime by U.S. or Bahamian authorities. He has repeatedly and categorically denied any wrongdoing. No court has found him responsible for anything. Under the law, he is presumed innocent, and that protection matters, regardless of how any piece of evidence in this video reads to you personally. What is also true, federal investigators have spent 2 months building a criminal case under a homicide statute, seizing 2 vessels, processing a thermal camera's cloud data, and routing evidence to Quantico. Both of those things are true at once. The investigation will eventually resolve the space between them. The question is only when. Lynette Hooker has still not been found. If you have any information about the night of April 4, 2026, near Elbow Cay or Hopetown, contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI or submit a tip directly at tips.fbi.gov. This case is not closed. If you want to be here the moment new evidence surfaces, subscribe now and share this with anyone who's been following it. Every confirmed development will be covered the moment it becomes public.